2 Samuel chapter 19. And it was told Joab, Behold, the king weeps and mourns for Absalom. And the victory that day was turned into mourning to all the people, for the people heard say that day how the king was grieved for his son, and the people got them by stealth that day into the city, as people being ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried with a loud voice, O my son Absalom! O Absalom, my son, my son! And Joab came into the house of the king and said, You have shamed this day the faces of all your servants, which this day have saved your life, and the lives of your sons, and of your daughters, and the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared this day that you respect neither princes nor servants. For this day I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and all we had died this day, then it had pleased you well. Now therefore arise, go forth, and speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you go not forth, not one will remain with you this night. And that will be worse to you than all the evil that befell you from your youth until now. Then the king arose and sat in the gate, and they told to all the people, saying, Behold, the king does sit in the gate. And all the people came before the king, for Israel had fled every man to his tent. And all the people were at strife throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, The king saved us out of the hand of our enemies, and he delivered us out of the hand of the Philistines. And now he has fled out of the land for Absalom, and Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now therefore, why speak you not a word of bringing the king back? And King David sent to Zadok to Abiathar the priest, saying, Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, seeing the speech of all Israel is come to the king, even to his house? You are my brethren, you are my bones and my flesh. Wherefore then are you the last to bring back the king? And say you to Amasa, Are you not of my bone and of my flesh? God do so to me, and more also, if you be not captain of the host before me continually in the room of Joab. And he bowed the heart of all the men to Judah, even as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word to the king, Return you and all your servants. So the king returned and came to Jordan, and to Judah came to Gilgal, to go to meet the king, to conduct the king over Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, which was of Bahurim, hasted and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. And there were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over Jordan before the king. And there went over a ferry boat to carry over the king's household and to do what he thought good. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was come over Jordan. And he said to the king, Let not my lord consider me guilty, neither do you remember that which your servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart. For your servant does know that I have sinned. Therefore, behold, I am come the first this day of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? And David said, What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should this day be adversaries to me? Shall there any man be put to death this day in Israel? For do not I know that I am this day king over Israel? Therefore the king said to Shimei, You shall not die. And the king swore to him. And Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and had neither dressed his feet, nor trimmed his beard, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came again in peace. And it came to pass, when he was come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, why went you not with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me, for your servant said, I will saddle me a donkey, that I may ride thereon, and go to the king, because your servant is lame, and has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is an angel of God. Do therefore what is good in your eyes. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king, yet did you set your servant among them that did eat at your own table. What right therefore have I yet to cry any more to the king? And the king said to him, Why speak you any more of your matters? I have said, You and Ziba divide the land. And Mephibosheth said to the king, Yea, let him take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace to his own house. And Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim and went over Jordan with the king to conduct him over Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old, and he had provided the king of sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. And the king said to Barzillai, Come you over with me, and I will feed you with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said to the king, How long have I to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old, and can I discern between good and evil? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voice of singing men, of singing women? Why then should your servant be yet a burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king, and why should the king compensate me with such a reward? Let your servant, I pray you, turn back again, that I may die in my own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and of my mother. But behold, your servant Chimham, let him go over with my lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good to you. And the king answered, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him that which shall seem good to you, and whatsoever you shall require of me, that will I do for you. And all the people went over Jordan, and when the king was come over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. Then the king went onto Gilgal, and Chimham went on with him, and all the people of Judah accompanied the king, and also half the people of Israel. And behold, all the men of Israel came to the king, and said to the king, Why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen you away, and have brought the king and his household, and all David's men with him over Jordan? And all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, Because the king is near of kin to us. Why then be you angry for this matter? Have we eaten at all of the king's cost, or has he given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah, and said, We have 10 parts in the king, and we have also more right in David than you. Why then did you despise us, that our advice should not be first had in bringing back our king? And the words of the men of Judah were harsher than the words of the men of Israel.